We don't appreciate what we have in our own backyard, or at least that's the case for me. I live near one of the most beautiful places in the world, Lake Tahoe. I'm within a half-hour drive from the lake, and I think I go maybe once or twice a year, and not always stopping at the lake, but maybe just driving through the Lake Tahoe area. Today was one of those days where we drove to Sacramento to visit some family members, so we didn't stop at the lake, but we did get a nice view of it along the way. And while I chat with you about our backyard, I'm just going to show you the footage that I recorded during our trip today. I'm not going to narrate the footage. I'm just going to talk a little bit about my excursions to Lake Tahoe and other parts of the local Sierra Nevada, other beautiful areas like Yosemite National Park, where I've been fortunate enough to visit because I grew up literally just down the street on the other side of the mountains. So I'm very spoiled when it comes to beautiful natural scenery. And as you can see, the difference from Carson City to Lake Tahoe is quite startling, I think, for some people. Once we get up Highway 50 a little bit and start to get into the tree line, I don't believe I recorded any footage of us actually leaving Eagle Valley, where we live. But once we get up above the tree line, it's quite a bit different from down here in the valley floor. And Lake Tahoe is something that I have enjoyed visiting throughout my life. As a child, I would go up there with my family, my parents, my grandparents, my cousins, and we would picnic along the shore. I remember in those days, if anybody else is familiar with them, they had something called shoestring potatoes that were actually very thinly sliced, crunchy potatoes, like very thin French fries. And they would come in a canister. And we would take sandwiches and canisters of shoestring potatoes. Sometimes we would take cold fried chicken and potato salad, and we would sit along the shore of this beautiful blue lake in the mountains. In those days, it was much less crowded than it is these days, and we would just enjoy a day at the lake. My husband and I honeymooned at Lake Tahoe, and back then we were both very young. We didn't have a lot of money. We also didn't have a lot of time, so we only spent a couple of days. But we stayed in a little motel that was just over the state line in California, about a block from the what was then called Harvey's Wagon Wheel Resort. It's now Caesars Republic, and it was an exciting time because we were newlyweds and we were about to start our life together. And we didn't do much in the lake. We didn't go in the water or anything, but we did drive around the lake. We visited places like Emerald Bay. We went around the whole perimeter of the lake, through the California side, back around on the Nevada side. We may have stopped off at Sand Harbor. I do remember from that trip that we had gotten a small camera. I think it was called an Instamatic. And it was the type of camera where you still had the flash cube. And we were climbing rocks to get a photo with the lake in the background, and the camera fell in the water. So we had to go and buy a second camera, which was, looking back, it wasn't that expensive, but at the time, we really had very little money. So buying a second camera was a bit of a shock, especially since, I mean, we did have some money that we received as wedding presents, but not a lot. So, we probably should have been a little bit more careful with what we were doing, but that's just one of those fun things you think about when you're looking back. We've also gone out on Lake Tahoe on a sternwheeler called the MS Dixie, or the MS Dixie 2, and they do daytime and evening cruises. In the evenings, they do a dinner cruise. The Dixie goes from Zephyr Cove to Emerald Bay and back. So it's a beautiful little trip across the lake, across the southern part of the lake. And we've really enjoyed going out to do that. We've also driven around Lake Tahoe since our honeymoon. We did it again, I think, when we moved back to Nevada. Once our kids were old enough and JT and I were able to go out exploring on our own again, we did another loop around Lake Tahoe. And I don't think that's something we will ever be doing again because the road around Emerald Bay, excuse me, can be quite winding, and it's rather terrifying to drive along that stretch of road. But our trip today took us past Lake Tahoe up to Echo Summit, and the drive along the east side of the Sierra Nevada to Echo Summit is rather treacherous also. It's very winding. There's a lot of rock face on one side of the road and a steep drop off on the other. Once you get past Echo Summit, though, it's into the forest, and there is quite a lot of beautiful views along the way. There is a very large section that I did not film because it's very sad. There was a major fire that burned a lot of the forested area, so that now it is just a lot of burned tree trunks, burned evergreen trunks. And I don't really like to capture that part of the forest because it's still a very sad reminder of a very large and tragic fire. But then once we get beyond that, there are fun little towns like Strawberry and Kyburz and Whitehall. And the road is 2 lanes for most of the way, so it's Highway 50. And the 2 lane portions can be a little nerve-wracking because there are inevitably people who will creep up behind you, just riding on your bumper until the next passing lane. People are so impatient. And it's quite a nice drive. The drive doesn't really take very long from Carson City to Sacramento. It was, with traffic and road construction, about 3 hours. So it's not an extremely long drive, but it is, in some places, a rather challenging drive because of the people who are in such a hurry to get past you. And since there are double stripes along the way, they can't pass you unless there is a passing lane because the road is so winding that it's treacherous. And if someone were to try to pass on a curve, that would be very dangerous. But then we would get down, and we traditionally stop in a little town called Pollock Pines. There is a Safeway right there, and at that point, it becomes a 4-lane highway again. So Highway 50 going into Sacramento from Pollock Pines is pretty much very well-traveled. It goes through Placerville and Rancho Cordova and all those places. Now, at one point, going around the curve, and I'm not sure, you may have already seen it, there is a beautiful waterfall way up on the mountain. And coming around that curve always reminds me of riding Radiator Springs Racers at Disney's California Adventure, because there is a part of that ride where you're in a car. It's from the movie Cars, and you're in one of the little cars and you come around a corner, go under a bridge, and then there's a swell of music and a waterfall. So whenever we round that curve and I see the waterfall, I always think of that swell of music from Radiator Springs Racers. And it sometimes makes me a little teary-eyed depending on my mood. That area is also very interesting because it looks a lot like some parts of Yosemite. And part of the reason for that is that it is very close. It's just north of Yosemite. To get to Yosemite National Park from where we live, you would have to take Highway 88, which is south of Highway 50. But the Highway 50 version, or area, goes through the backside of the Yosemite was created by glaciation, so the glaciers carved out the valley. And some of the rocks on the north side opposite of Yosemite National Park also show similar geologic formations, because it looks like it wasn't just Yosemite Valley that had the glaciation, but also other parts of the area. Now, of course, Yosemite Valley itself is one of the most beautiful places I have ever seen. It's tied pretty closely with Lake Tahoe, but things like Half Dome and Bridal Veil Falls, and it's just an absolutely beautiful valley. And that's another place that I enjoyed quite a bit growing up because it was quite literally in my backyard. I think it was about 2 hours from our home in California to Yosemite. And that was the day when you could actually just drive in and find parking spots. You didn't have to do the reservation systems that I think you have to do today because it has become so popular and much too crowded for them to allow too many cars into the valley at the same time. So things have changed quite a bit from my childhood in many ways, and going through Highway 50 reminds me a lot of those fun trips that I enjoyed as a child. And as you can see, the scenery is quite striking. I just love making the drive. We don't often do day trips down to California, but in this case, we chose to do it because there really was no sense in us staying in a hotel down there because we were just going to visit for a short time and then come home. So we decided to just make it a day trip. And all in all, it took us about what some people might consider a work day. We left at about 8:30 in the morning and got home at around 6 p.m. And it was tiring, but not bad. It was a very pleasant visit with family, and definitely nice to get out on the road a little bit and enjoy the beautiful scenery. So I hope you've enjoyed this little drive through the Sierra Nevada with me along Highway 50. These are just choppy bits of recording that I did along the way. I stopped at Pollock Pines because I was actually taking over the driving into Sacramento. So that was about all the footage that I got. So I didn't really take anything of us going through Folsom and down into the valley because there is quite a nice view from that area into, you can actually see across the valley to downtown Sacramento with all the skyscrapers. So I didn't get that footage, but I did get a lot of the very scenic parts of the road. So I hope you enjoyed them. And Highway 50 is an interesting cross-country highway. JT and I did visit the East Coast a couple years ago, and we saw the opposite end of Highway 50 because 50 starts in Sacramento and it ends in Maryland. So we have visited both ends of Highway 50, and they are very different from each other because the Maryland side is near the coast, and it's oh, I don't know. It's the coast, the East Coast, the beaches look much different from those on the West Coast. They're very different vibes, and I don't know quite how to describe it. But having grown up in California and being so familiar with the Pacific Coast, visiting the Atlantic coast was quite the difference. So today's little adventure, I hope, is something that you enjoyed. And I apologize if I'm a little tongue tied this evening because I am pretty tired. It's getting close to bedtime. But I wanted to make sure to post this video. And I wanted to also remind you that there are probably fun things that you can visit in your own backyard as well. Many of us are going to be a little bit short on funds considering the costs of everything and how prices are rising. So take advantage of your local scenery, take advantage of your local museums, visit your independent bookstores, take a vacation in your own backyard because taking a little drive like the one we took today can shake things up just enough to make you feel like you had a little bit of a vacation. And if that means just driving to the other side of town and maybe finding a nice place to picnic, that's great. Get out in nature, take a walk around your neighborhood and look at the houses. Just do something to break up your routine, especially since here in the Northern Hemisphere, it is summertime, and this should be a time for us to get out and enjoy the nice weather. So I thank you for joining me today. I hope you're having a wonderful week so far, and I will talk to you again tomorrow. I'm Cassidy Carson, and this is the Life of a Writer. Take care.